second brief, and that was because there was one thing to make people realise that they needed to do differently, and to be more inclusive, and then there's another to actually explore and how you do that in real life in making real ads more inclusive, and that's where we came up with a poster or a brief, essentially just to create posters that re-envisage current or past ads campaigns to be more inclusive of the LGBTQ plus community with advertising. And that was really quite an open, flexible one where they, could take any past brief and reimagine it to make it more inclusive. And we saw, again, a great response from across the board. We even, had one of the brands featured actually pick it up and retweet and reply to that submitter. So keep doing these things. But I'd actually like to introduce you another 3 of our panelists, talk about the second brief. And we have Pete, Rachel, and Emma. Pete, if you could introduce yourself, that'd be terrific.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Pete Markey, and in the day job, I look after marketing for TSB Bank, but I'm also the exec sponsor for LGBT and one of the judges this year for Outvertising.
Thank you. And Rachel?
Hi everybody, I'm Rachel Reese. I am CEO of Global Butterflies, which is a trans and non-binary inclusion training company. I'm working alongside originally Pride AM and now Advertising on judging and advising, which is a lot of fun.
And Emma.
Hello, I'm Emma. I'm a senior creative at Tribal DDB, and my pronouns are she, her.
Very good. I mean, yes, our pronouns are all important, and we should all remember it's a man, she, her. So good prompt.
Natasha inspired me.
Yeah, no, Natasha was very good. And that's the thing. I think that's a learning for us all. Is we're constantly, everyone makes us, forgets and trips, and but it's just trying to do better. And I think that's the key lesson for advertising is don't be afraid. If your intention and meaning is good and you talk to the right people, it's all good. So the second brief, so this is where we're reimagining. Again, we saw an amazing response for the OMB community. And there, of course, there are still some submissions, some fresh people adding rainbows to logos and to make them inclusive. But we, and there were some really great examples of that. But the end of the ones that were shortlisted were ones that were really answering the brief of reimagining an ad that was still doing its job that was initially intended, but making it inclusive. Because there's a difference between a Pride ad and showing solidarity with the community, and then versus actually making an ad that's inclusive. And ultimately, the biggest change that we can do is making just all ads inclusive, and not making it an LGBTQ plus ad, just inclusive ads. Were there any particular, I think that struck all of us, when you were going through your judging rounds, but was there anything that particularly struck you or surprised you or gave you hope, Rachel, particularly?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the this year. We've been doing this a number of times, and the trans and non-binary representation was much more clever and subtle and much less in your face with the custard pie. Really liked the fact that I was seeing my community spaces come back in a natural way, representative way, less fetish, less extreme. And I love to see that this year. It really was, and I really enjoyed looking at all of them. But particularly, that was one of the things that struck home for me this time.
And Pete, anything strike you or surprise you about what you saw?
Yeah, I mean, this was my first year of judging, and the quality of the work was just outstanding this year. Literally, really great work. And actually, for me, it just showed how simple it is to make even the slightest change to your creative work and the level of impact it can have. So some of the work we'll see in a minute, actually, these are subtle differences, but powerful differences. And it just shows actually brands can make even the smallest of moves, and the impact is huge to better represent the LGBT community. So I was really inspired by the work. Much of it fantastic, really good stuff.
Yeah, and Emma, this is your first year helping out, in judging in the Outvertising Awards. How did you find it? Were you surprised or shocked by it?
I wasn't shocked, which was good. But no, I absolutely loved hosting and doing the judging. It was awesome, and this is great too. But when we saw, you know, exactly what these guys said, the subtlety of these ads and the kind of power that they had, even though they were quite quiet in the subtle changes that they made, it was just awesome to see the sort of impact you can make by simply changing a couple of things. And I think in particular with the submissions that we saw and kind of crowned winners, they kind of they did these small tweaks, but they were really intrinsic things to who the brands are. So really committing to change and not just doing, you know, that Pride Month rainbow flag that you were talking about. Actually changing like a complete brand line, or, you know, leaning on their usual creative but adding that twist. So it was really inspiring to see. And like Pete said, it doesn't need to be, you know, totally groundbreaking. It's just, you know, being committed to making those differences.
Yeah, and I think it's a really great point, actually, because I think that's something that resoundingly came up, was all the ones that rose to the top made changes to the brand that were credible for that brand to do. So if they were homely values, they were homely values just with a different representation from what their heteronormative that they would use as a default. If there was a key line about adventure or something, it would just be an you know, different narrative or protagonist that would feature in that. And to me, it was really inspiring of actually, Mark, Pete, as you said, it, like how little a change was actually required to make a big difference, because they were all grounded in real truths, like universal truths of love or adventure or strife or whatever. So yeah, some really amazing examples. And I'd like, you know, as with the previous one, we have 2 honourable mentions because there were just so many great ones. And if anyone wants to see the shortlist, you can see it from the outvertising.org website. And you know, or give us a shout afterwards in the after show. But we're going to highlight the 2 honourable mentions. Again, all terrific, lots of debate with this one because there was just so many, it was really hard to narrow it down. But the first one I'd like to highlight is the Lego one by Paper Jam Create. Now, I don't know if everyone on the call has necessarily seen the original Lego series where it's Lego blocks, quite crude and basic, but actually then a really sophisticated shadow, showing what the imagination behind that is really, and the intent and thought. But again, this one got everyone talking, and we were lucky enough to have the submitter on the social call, and they talked through the different things of considerations and how far to push it, and really enjoyed being able to actually hear feedback and see what was right and what was wrong, and things like the Lego logo, just changing it into LGBTQ+. We actually discussed that, and it came up in the judging again, but actually it was nice, but it also wasn't necessarily necessary. If it means it could have still just been a Lego ad with the shadow and the Lego logo. But how did you, I mean, Emma, you had some great points on this, about its builds and options.
Yeah, I think there was a bit of healthy discussion around this because I actually ended up coming around a bit more. I think Rachel had some great points on the imagery used in the shadows. So my first instinct, I love the guy on the left and the kind of the womanly silhouette, and you know, you can pick up your own idea of what they're saying here, especially the LGBTQ+ helps, I guess, if you're not familiar with the community. But on the right, I wasn't sure about the masculine kind of, you know, strong man shadow. I still think it's a really lovely idea, and I really love the execution of it. It's just whether that shadow should be a different kind of more normal male figure, or if we're kind of leaning on stereotypes again for, you know, especially the queer community, whether, you know, we look at men to be these macho kind of guys and actually not always. But it could go either way, you know, you don't want to lean too much one way. It was just something that we had a great discussion about. I think this was probably my favorite. But yeah, it was really great to see.
It was highly debated. And again, that's the thing where a series helped as well, because then you're not limited, you know, there could be a couple of the one on the right with different versions of what a man shadow should be, or the whole spectrum. And the second honourable mention, if we could pull that up now, is Mont Blanc. Which is also actually by Sam Henning. No, it was not highlighted in junior judging, but is obvious now. So well done to Sam, who also had a go at this brief. And this one actually surprised a few of the judges who didn't quite register why it was necessarily an inclusive piece. Rachel, I think you.
Well, yeah, it was. I really loved this one. Sorry, yeah, I really loved this one. I did love the Lego one as well, but I agree with all the comments that were made. But this one, it was interesting on so many. One, we didn't know it was Katie Lang, so that was quite interesting. Like, wow, it's Katie Lang. So that was lots of energetic debate. I love, because normally the black and white, the Mont Blanc is a black and white imagery of a guy, and this was Katie Lang, and then I loved it because it was very androgynous. So it was like, wow, this is really pushing a lot of boundaries here. And I found that image so striking that it would have made me, if I'd seen that, I would have stopped and looked. And I just thought this was a really lovely picture and campaign. So yeah, it was really strong for me on so many fronts, just who it was and the representation across the community, intentional or not on the androgynous thing, but I loved it.
Yeah, and Pete, just to your point of small changes, essentially it's just changing the individual in this, but keeping it still true to the brand qualities and energy and characteristics.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so simple but so lovely, isn't it? And so impactful. And I think that word legend, I think it just brings that across with clearly picking Katie Lang to front it. So it was very clever, really great work by Sam.
Yeah, so well done. Just aware of time, but I just wanted to capture if the three of you, if you each had one sort of critical insight or piece of advice or impression that you got from this that you'd like to share. Rachel,
yeah, for the future, remember your audience. Remember your audience, because this is what I do all day. But 12% of millennials identify as non-binary, and Gen Z, that's going to be 20%. So that's your audience. So make sure you're getting those representations in your advertising now, right, before Gen Z fully into the workplace. And all the other thing was just, we talked a lot about, right through all the awards, about backing up action. If you're pushing a campaign that's LGBT focused, make sure that you're doing something other than doing the adverts in your own, as an organization. Make sure you're doing something that just shows your authenticity, just so that we know that you really mean it. That was one.
No, that's great.
Strong for me.
And Pete. No, thank you, Rachel.
Yeah,
Pete?
no, I think, but building on something Rachel said, I think this bit about being true to your purpose, living and breathing it, I think is really important in this work. So the work that was the best in this category was the work that came out of what the brand was about. But my second point, as I said a moment ago, was it was done in a really simple way. So it was powerful, it was true, it was authentic. But it was simple and easy and fitted almost seamlessly into the broader comms that those brands are doing. If you look at things like the Lego campaign, Mont Blanc, and I'm not going to reveal any more about our favourite in the category, but when you come to that, actually they were all really simple, brilliant ideas, well executed, but very, very true to those brands.
100%. And Emma, is there anything you'd like to say?
Yes, I guess it's more of an emotional hook, I suppose. But for me, it's remembering anyone in our industry, is that advertising goes sort of beyond feeling seen by brands. It's not just about making sure people feel seen, but it really reaffirms people's sense of place in society. So if you're actually seeing yourself and you recognize your family or your partnerships, it's really important to see that and just keep that in mind in all of the work that you're doing. And I think these guys have done that, and it's more of an emotional, they've not just ticked a box, they've really thought about how impactful and hopeful it makes people.
Very good words. I think that's extremely right. And I think hopefully inspiring to some of the brands featured. by these people to show how little tweaks can make such a big difference. You know, I think, again, referring to stats, they've shown that between 18 and 25-year-olds, over half of them don't identify as completely heterosexual, for example, and all these numbers of, you know, a true spectrum of identifications. You know, you need to start reflecting that in advertising so people, but it benefits society and brands, so there's no excuse not to really do it.